computer. Why, yes, we are. Okay, I'm going to start it.
Thank you.
Christine, thank you.
There they are. What a lovely people. All right.
Hello,
we
everyone.
have 2 minutes till 4, so we're going to wait. And then I assume that people are online watching the live stream. We are going to try to turn off video feeds as much as we can, just because we've had a request from a couple people that so many videos make it hard for them to their internet to function. So so if you have questions or whatnot, if you can turn on your video then and you're obviously in your microphone, I think that'll make it easiest. So I get to look at all your cool pictures instead. And I don't know, Casey, on the live stream, is it the whole screen or is it whoever's talking?
I don't know.
Okay.
It usually does speaker view, and so it'll just show the speaker.
Okay. Yay. Thanks, Christine. Okay. So, all right.
All right. I'm admitting some more people.
Okay.
Great, and just watch and listen.
Yes, or if you have anything, Carol, you want to jump in with, go for it as we kind of get through this. There is obviously the chat is enabled for all of you that are in here. So if you have any questions that you want to put in the chat, we can also jump to those. We just want to make sure that for the sake of people outside of this virtual room, that they're able to hear the questions read out loud so that we know what's going on. Okay. All right. Do you think we're good, Casey?
Yeah. I mean, I've got that. I'm still letting in people now. I think you guys are good. I can't have volume on my Facebook because you're delayed on the Facebook Live.
Okay.
So, and if people monitor the chat here, I can monitor Facebook, I think.
Okay.
Bear with us, please. We're trying new technology, and it was an hour and a half trying to figure this all out, plus an hour in the morning realizing, oh, look, YouTube won't work for 24 hours.
Yes. So we're glad that you're all here. If there is anyone that wasn't able to show up today or wasn't able to log into Facebook because they don't have a Facebook account, we will be recording this. We are recording this, and we will be able to upload it to that YouTube channel as well as to our website and perhaps even within Facebook if we can figure that out. But welcome, everybody. I'm Carly Holliday. I am the Vice President-elect of the Cherry Creek Education Association. Casey Ellis is our President-elect. She is running all of the technology. So I'm going to try to kind of help direct the conversation so that she can kind of deal with other things on the back end. Joining us today for the sake of this meeting are the members of the newly created Cherry Creek Educators Advisory Council, which was developed honestly in the last 6 weeks. And there are 35 educators representing different parts of the district, different affinity groups, different levels, different schools, different curricular areas, as well as SSPs, coordinators, etc. And we tried to create as diverse of a group as possible to give us as much information as possible about what it is that we should be doing moving forward, specifically with regards to the Restart task force work and what it is we're going to do to restart school in the fall. Then in addition to that, we have members of our incoming and our outgoing executive boards. So they have all been invited to be here as well to kind of help direct the conversation. So they will all be able to ask questions, bring up anything that they think is important that the rest of you at home may want to know about. And so that's kind of how we're going to structure today. I wanted to start with just giving you kind of a timeline and an overview of how we got here. I had a great conversation with a member this morning who helped me understand that I think one of the biggest things right now is that it feels like we're kind of in the dark. We don't know what's going on. We don't know all of the conversations that are happening. And so just knowing that those discussions are occurring, that teachers are involved in those conversations, helps put some people at ease. And so I think it's important for everybody to kind of have a full picture of what it is that we've been doing for the last 8 to 10 weeks, and how it is that the association has been involved, and how it is that members have been involved, and what it is that we hope to accomplish moving forward. So just to give you an idea of, I want to give you a little overview, and then we'll be able to open it up to various questions that have either been shared with us ahead of time or will be shared with us via the CEAC committee as well as the executive board members. So in terms of the timeline, we obviously went out of school on March 12th, and sometime in April, we went back to the bargaining table to try to finish up bargaining. And I'll come back to the bargaining conversation in a little bit, but because of the fact that we were able to reach a settlement in May, which was a strategic decision made by the bargaining team to help us focus on, instead of the what ifs, instead focus the attention of the district on the actuals once we got to July and we rolled over from one year to the next, and we knew exactly what was spent, and we knew exactly what we were saving or not saving with regards to benefits changes, as well as to everything else that was going on, that we would then be able to return to the table to really talk about those things and to dig into it, because at that point, nobody knew when the School Finance Act was ever going to get determined, and in the end it was even weeks later than they had originally planned. So so then what happened, because of the fact that we were able to kind of wrap up bargaining, then at the beginning of May the district decided to create a restart task force, and that ramped up very quickly. And the reality is we were the one district that was really starting to have those conversations in early May with teachers and administrators to figure out what are the possibilities for what school will look like in the fall, what are the decisions that need to be made, what are the conversations that need to be had, you know, how much PPE do we need, what does school look like, etc. And so that was the intention in May going forward, was to start meeting on a regular basis. What's interesting since then that we've been told is that there are some districts that are just now starting to have those conversations. And because of that, I think they're kind of behind the 8 ball. In some ways, they have been listening to Cherry Creek School District and trying to figure out what Creek is doing, and then either following, you know, our lead or not, and being able to share ideas across different districts. In addition to that, from what it sounds like, and Casey can kind of confirm this, but what it sounds like is that there is, sorry, there's just a strange thing that happened. Greg, you're trying to share your screen. So the other unions in the area, other associations and locals have not been involved in their conversations. We have one district specifically that yesterday was handed a document that was being sent to the community, basically, and said, here's our plan, here's what we're doing, and teachers had not been involved in any of the creation of that plan. So that in and of itself has caused us, you know, has helped us to understand that that we're kind of in a unique situation and that we've been involved in the conversation. I also would say that because of the fact that we were not still trying to finish bargaining in June, it gave us the opportunity to really push on those conversations right now, knowing that we were going to be able to come back and kind of talk about compensation, furlough days, et cetera, in July. So that's where it started. We have met twice a week since the beginning of May. We are scheduled to meet basically until the school year starts. In addition to that, Casey and I have been in different other meetings with leadership, trying to figure out what else needs to be happening. We've met with principals, other teachers, etc. Then somewhere about 4 weeks into this, we decided that we needed more educator voice and that it was beneficial to us to be able to listen to as many teachers as possible. So then we created this Cherry Creek Educators Advisory Council. We asked for volunteers. We received over 180 volunteers. We went through, combed through that list and tried to find as many representative people as we could. And we landed on the 35 lovely people that are here today and have been meeting with us every week since the end of May. And the idea is that we meet with the task force on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then in between the SEAC also meets. And in addition to that, we also added 3 other teachers to the task force, to the district level task force. Those 3 teachers represent elementary specials, elementary special ed, and a general ed classroom teacher in elementary who's also moving to the middle school this year. So we tried to get some different voices as much as possible because we think it's important for these high level decisions that are being made to be grounded in the reality of what's going to happen in my classroom on day 1 or what's going to happen in my office on day 1 when we go back to school. Because we all know that sometimes when the decisions get made up here, they don't always necessarily think down here about what it is that this really means for us. So that's been the kind of conversations that we've had. In the midst of going through the task force, I will be honest with you that, 2-3 weeks ago, I think we thought we had a plan, right? And the superintendent had announced he was going to have a town hall with all 9,000 employees, and we were going to lay out this plan. And we were all pretty confident in the plan and clear as to what was going on, absent any direction or recommendations from the governor or CDE or CDPHE. So we've had a lot of really good conversations to get to that point. And that is when we were going to have this plan where we were going to be remote on Mondays, and we were going to have, an AABB schedule, meaning that we were going to split all of our student groups into 2, and there was going to be an A cohort and a B cohort, and you would see half your students twice a week, and then the other half would come the other 2 days of the week. And then we would kind of swap in terms of mixing in some kind of online instruction. How that was going to work was still yet to be determined. We were still trying to figure out the parameters of that, how to make sure that that didn't overwhelm teachers, because there was some real concerns about, does that create double the work for teachers? What are we doing to protect teachers' planning time, et cetera? And where we landed was basically, we were going to, figure those sort of things out, but they wanted to be able to communicate to the community. This is kind of our plan. 2 days before that webinar was scheduled, the governor made a comment to a group of charter school leaders that indicated that he believed we could go back to school basically normal as long as we had class sizes of 20 to 25 kids. We were not prepared for that comment. No one knew it was coming. No one knew where he got the number of 20 to 25 kids. So that sort of threw things into a loop. And then we got to Friday, the presentation happened, and a lot of elementary teachers were thoroughly confused because all of a sudden it was very clear that, oh, we're going to have AABB schedule for middle and high school, but we don't know exactly what we're going to do with the elementary, but we think we're going to go back full time. And that was because they started to talk about the idea that we could handle most elementary classes with some kids choosing to go online full time, as well as some shuffling of numbers. We might be able to get close to 25 kids in our elementary classes. It's much harder to get there in some of our high school sections as well as our middle school sections. So that was kind of the thinking. And then since then, the communication has gone out. Then they basically decided we totally could make this work. And so then the communication went out last week to say that elementary for sure is going 5 days a week. And our middle and high schools, we're trying to figure out a way to make them 5 days a week, because now what the governor is suggesting is that you're looking at a cohort model where you're trying to keep kids within a cohort all day long as much as possible with very little transition. So they felt confident that at the elementary level, they can sort of handle the transitions. Middle school, it's more of a conversation about could we go back to a purely team model? And then if kids were in teams, could that ensure that kids are within a cohort and they're not necessarily moving or mixing groups as much? And then at the high school level, there's still a very large question mark about how would we make this happen? They really want to have kids go back to school 5 days a week at all 3 grade levels. The problem is how to make that work. I know as high school teachers out there are probably wondering that sounds nearly impossible. And I think there are some ideas about how to make it happen. I don't know where we'll end up with that. And those conversations are just now starting with the high school directors as well as the high school principals. And then it will come to the task force, and then task force will start to vet it and figure out what it is we can do with it. The other thing they figured out is that obviously parents want information. They want to know what to plan for. Teachers want to know what to plan for. And so they want to try to start making some decisions soon so that we can figure that out. Okay. Then in the midst of all of that, of course, the other thing that's looming over everyone's heads would be the budget crisis. How we got here, what do we do with it? You know, how do we somehow offer kids more and meet even larger needs with significantly less money? And how do we do that when we already were looking at this $30 to $50 million structural deficit that we were trying to figure out via Future Forward before COVID hit? And then how do we deal with it moving forward now when we're faced with another 60 million? So there's that. And then there's been a tremendous amount of social unrest around the world. And we have seen protests, we have seen, you know, significant social change conversations that are happening. We have students of color, we have teachers of color, we have communities in our district that are impacted by what is happening in lots of different ways. And we have to think about, as an organization, how are we going to help support those students and teachers and employees when they come back to work in August, especially given everything else that's going on right now. So that's kind of, you know, those are sort of the big 3 right now that we're all trying to kind of deal with. And I think that there's, you know, there's no easy answer. And my feeling is that, and I think Casey would agree with me, the entire exec board would agree with me, that the only way we're going to get through all of this is for us to figure out how to do this together. And that we need more and more voices involved. We really need to include more people in the conversation so that we make sure that we really are considering all of the different scenarios, all the different ramifications for different people that are impacted by everything that's being decided. And we take it very seriously that we have a seat at the table to be able to have these conversations, to influence those discussions, to make sure that our employees are protected, that our students are taken care of, and that we believe we are the ones that kind of know best about what it is that should be happening in our schools. And so we should be the ones that are asked and consulted. And the good news is, so far, that's what's been happening. I know that it feels like it's not. I know that it feels like you're getting pieces of information. There's a lot of rumors out there, and that sometimes maybe we're not always acting in the best interest of as many people as we possibly can, but I can't stress enough that I don't think that's the case. We really are working very hard with a limited amount of time to be able to figure out how to make this as manageable and doable as possible, knowing that it's not going to be easy. So I want to, there are no questions yet in the chat, so I'm going to wait and see if any show up. If there are things that we're going to, I want to start with, I'm going to start with the Restart Task Force. So if there are questions applying to the Restart Task Force, if we could sort of talk about that, then we're going to talk about the budget, and then we'll also talk about the protests and the social unrest and what it is we're thinking we're doing with that, okay? So one question that was asked was, does the 6 feet social distancing rule no longer apply if we have 20 to 25 students in a class? Excellent question. The reality is we're not quite sure of the answer to that question yet, but what it sounds like is there has been a recommendation now that we move from 6 feet social distancing to 3 feet social distancing. There's also some other medical information that's coming out in the next couple of days that will probably help clarify even more. The metro area health organizations are all getting together and finally kind of making some recommendations for schools to reopen that help to clarify what exactly is safe, what's healthy, how do we protect our employees and our students and their families when they go home. Are we, ensuring that everyone has to wear masks, which I know is a huge question out there. And where we are right now is there is an expectation that everyone will wear masks. The caveat that's been given to us is it's possible that that recommendation will change, that the state could make a different declaration, or CDE or the public health department may say something else. And in that case, we may have to adjust. But as of right now, I think we all understand that the way to encourage people to come back and to help our teachers feel like they are safe going back to work, that there is an expectation that kids wear masks. The reality is we have some kids who aren't going to be able to wear masks because of health concerns or other issues that may prevent them. And then there's also been purchasing of lots of PPE, including shields, clear shields for students, other kinds of masks, pediatric size masks, to be able to ensure that kids will be protected and that they will be protected from sort of protecting you in the fact that they're wearing a mask or a shield or whatever. In terms of, let's see, Greg asked what happens if cases continue to increase and hospitals are overwhelmed. I think, Greg, right now, people are sort of operating under the understanding that if and when this virus spikes and we are overwhelmed, if it spreads through a school, if it ends up shutting down a feeder area, that there is probably a likelihood at some point this year we are going to go back fully online. I don't know for how long. That'll kind of depend on the virus. I think we're already starting to see what do these spikes mean. But as of right now, most people say you should try to get kids started as early as possible in August, so that then if that were to happen, it's going to happen later in the fall. And so you've hopefully gotten in as much instruction and worked with kids before you've had to go back to the remote learning environment. Let's see. And one of the questions that's been out there is about substitutes and what are we doing with subs? How are we doing class coverage? What happens if I'm sick? Do I use my sick days? There are some aspects of the CARES Act that sort of create parameters around sick days, FMLA leave that's COVID related. So the district is still trying to figure out how those rules apply, what we would do, how would we use the sick leave bank, et cetera. We also know that there is a possibility that many of our substitutes that we generally rely on are not going to want to come back to a school in the midst of this. And so what are we going to do if we have even greater shortages of subs? And so there's been talk about, the comment that's been made to us is we are going to be all hands on deck this year. And that may mean that there are administrators, that there are coordinators, that there are, deans that are being asked to cover classes if there are, classes that aren't covered. Part of the conversation, of course, would be, what does that look like? Do they get comped? Is there compensation associated with that? Which are all things that we need to have a conversation about. And part of the things that we're going to negotiate when we come back at the end of July will be an MOU that governs what are the rules that we will live by this year. Based on whatever decision we finally make about what school is going to look like, what are the things we're going to do to protect teachers, to protect our SSPs, to protect our students, what are, how are we going to deal with the illness? What are we going to deal with, in terms of people who can't be in the building because of underlying health conditions, et cetera. There's some questions about, sorry, there's a lot of them in here now. I shouldn't have asked, I guess. Melissa asked a really good question about, if we go fully remote, are we going to have different expectations? Are grades going to count? Are we going to have more guidelines? And the answer is yes. There is a lot of conversation about how do we make sure that we're all using the same learning management system, that parents are aware of what it is that we're doing, that kids are not being told that grades are hold harmless anymore, but that there are expectations that they are fully engaged in what it is that they're doing. Of course, with the expectation that we know that there are going to be some students that are going to be more impacted by going back home full time than other students. So those things will change. In terms of synchronous versus asynchronous, I think there's still some conversation about that. And to be honest with you, when we were looking at a Monday being a remote day and 4 days of AABB schedules, the idea was this would be the way to sort of help ease us into an online environment if and when we have to go there. The problem is right now that now we're not kind of looking at that option, so we don't know what it is we're going to do. But there is PD lined up. There are things that are going to be happening during work week to help prepare teachers for all of this. Let's see. I'm trying to. If there's anyone who, wants to jump in. Yes, Rachel.
So there have been some questions about supplying masks to students. Are they being required to wear them? Are they going to be supplied? There are also questions about PPE for teachers.
The answer is that yes, all of that is being procured right now. Some of it has already been purchased. They've purchased 9,000 jugs of hand sanitizer. One of the things I will tell you is that our district jumped on purchasing PPE and any cleaning supplies really, really early because they knew that it was going to be difficult to get that the closer we got to the beginning of the school year. And so they have already secured a lot of it, and it's in warehouses. They have different kinds of masks. They have different kinds of face shields, like I said, both for students as well as for teachers. And the expectation is, as of right now, the expectation is that everyone will wear masks. If something changes in terms of health guidelines, then that could be a conversation. But as of right now, we have advocated very strongly that we believe everyone should be required to wear masks to protect people. And until we get clear information that that's unnecessary, then that's going to be that will continue to be our stance. So yes, does that answer that, Rachel?
Yeah, and so there's another question about what ideas are being thrown out for cohorting at the high school level.
They're crazy ideas. If I tell them to you, you're going to. There's some of you may know about like a Colorado college model. Some of you, which is where you take a class, you take 1 or 2 classes for 4 weeks straight, and then you switch to another class. I don't think that's going to be the model, but that's one of them that's been talked about. Another one is trying to limit the number of transitions from one class to the next, and trying to figure out how to have larger blocks of time in the day, fewer periods, spread out over the week. So I don't know yet. That's all that's actually hearsay from me having conversations with a couple of people. That hasn't been officially presented to the task force yet. In terms of the other thing that's happening right now, and so Sonia asked about what's the plan for elementary specials, and we just this week were asked to finally find not only our specials teachers at the elementary level, as well as our SSPs, specifically at the elementary level to start with, as well as special ed, to be able to work in 2 subcommittees to start to make specific recommendations about what do we do with these particular groups of students and how are these classes going to get taught now that we've made a decision about this 5-day-a-week going back to school. So that's part of it too. And once, if a decision is made about middle school, then we'll be able to start to have that conversation about middle school. And then there is another group of performing arts teachers that are currently meeting with Michelle Weinrob to also talk about, who's our head nurse, to talk about what do we do with music classes where, you know, kids are obviously breathing and spreading, and how does that work, and what do we, how do we kind of protect people with that and still hopefully try to have class. So in terms of the specifics about what would happen if someone tests positive, what happens to the school, do we shut down? Do we know how many days? The answer is we don't know the specifics yet because the recommendations have not come from the state. Part of what's been really difficult about doing any of this is there's been very little direction. And so absence of direction, we've been trying to figure things out ourselves, knowing full well that, you know, something may come up that changes a lot of what we're saying. From what I've been told, June 30th, the governor is going to make an announcement with new recommendations. So depending on, you know, what that entails, that may help us to know, are we going to close for 48 hours to clean? Are we going to close for a 2-week quarantine? You know, what happens to if the kid is sick or is in a cohort and then has siblings at all the other grade levels? Do we close the whole feeder area or not? We don't know yet, because some of that we're going to have to figure out as it happens. So I know there's a lot of questions also about some of our special populations and how it is we're going to meet those needs, how it is that those teachers and special educators and SSPs are going to do the overwhelming amount of work that's being asked of them. And we are trying very much to sort of nail that down so that there are some clear parameters for our special education teachers, because we know that the last 2.5 months was really difficult for them and there were a lot of expectations placed on them, and we need to figure out moving forward how it is that we can help alleviate some of that and come up with some reasonable ways to meet the needs of our students and to obviously follow their IEPs, but also to make sure that that we recognize the needs of those teachers too. Okay.
Carly,
Yes.
oh, sorry. We have a question here that I think that a lot of people have based on a lot of things. But Kenyatta says, considering furlough days, reduction in pay, etc., will there be an opportunity to readjust benefit elections?
I don't believe so. That's an insurance, that's kind of a Kaiser thing, right? They have an open enrollment period. They decide, you know, what's going to happen and when. And pretty much that's an insurance rule, company rule, in terms of you don't get to make changes again until open enrollment happens again. There were some exceptions to that because of COVID, and there were some things under the CARES Act that gave provisions for that. But as of right now, I think that that's all kind of been expired. I mean, it could change again depending on, you know, if something happens with the virus, but I don't think so. I did also hear Greg wrote in here that one of the elementary principals had explained that their staff would be provided with shields because they didn't think they should wear masks because it's important to see their face and their mouth, especially when they're teaching small children how to read. And so there's definitely considerations like that that are being made. I think the biggest thing I would just say about the restart, and then we can move to the budget and kind of the other issues. The big thing about the restart task force, what I have said to people is I felt so much better when finally we started to get into the weeds a little bit and district leadership started talking about all of the different things that they had been trying to figure out, all the different questions they were trying to answer, all the different scenarios and situations that they were dealing with. And it helped me because I realized that like you probably, there's kind of this feeling of, well, have they thought of this? And did they think about this? And what about this? And I bet you nobody's thought of this. And we've gotten a lot of those questions as well that we've been able to pass on to the district. And what's good to know is that there really are a lot of people really purposefully, carefully going through all of these questions and trying to figure it out. And we have certainly helped that conversation by being there and asking a lot of those questions. And the more questions that you share with us, the more things you think about, that also helps us. This group online right now, the CCEA, has been instrumental in sharing their thoughts and kind of going home and thinking about it and then coming back with further questions. Dr. Siegfried, Chris Smith, and Jen Perry also came to our last meeting and answered their questions for an hour, and they were able to get a lot of clarification as well. That's why we sent out a list of their names and their email addresses, because they are also excellent resources for you to be able to ask questions and to be able to get answers to you. And we'll make sure that we send that list out again so that our members can continue to also talk with them, because they know a lot. And you may find somebody on that list that has a similar job as you or is in a particular section of the district that matches where you are, and maybe you have a specific question to that you can be able to pose to them. And hopefully, they'll know the answer, or they'll be able to get you to the person who will get you an answer, or we'll get the question to the right people so that we can figure out what it is we're doing. So that's kind of the big thing. The last thing I want to say about the restart is just that there was an email that was sent out by Brenda Smith, who's Chief Human Resources Officer, a couple weeks ago about the RACOM process. It's an acronym. It has something to do with reasonable accommodations, and it's under the ADA Act, and it is a way in which teachers can ask for reasonable accommodations because they have some sort of disability that prevents them from being able to do their job as they typically would. And so what that means is, right now the district has decided this is the process by which they're going to determine what teachers or SSPs or whoever cannot perform their job in their classroom because they have an underlying health condition, they have another significant situation or something else. And the idea is that you need to fill out that form so that they can begin to figure out how many teachers do we have that have particular needs, and what is it that we're going to do, whether they can move to an online classroom, what would that look like, how many online teachers do we need. I know there are some people who have been hesitant to fill out that form or unsure about filling out that form. If you have questions, I would tell you to contact Casey or myself, and we will try to help you walk through that form. I would also tell you that it's really important that even if you're not sure yet, if you really need the accommodation or you're not sure about your particular situation and you need to know more information, we need the district to know how many teachers are out there that feel like because of their particular situation, they are unsure about going back to work in the building. And the more information they have, the better off we are in the long run to be able to make sure that we're meeting everyone's needs. And right now, I don't think they have that sense in the same way that Casey and I do, because we've been getting a lot of questions about it, and we want to make sure that the district is hearing those same questions. So please make sure that you fill out the RACOM process. I also know there are a handful of teachers that are on a 110 that are not able to have communication with the district or do anything work-related for the month of June. And the district has made it clear that July 1, they will send out that RACOM process information again for our teachers that are going on a 110, so they'll be able to figure out and apply for those accommodations that they need to. All right, so I'm gonna try to move to the budget, and there's a lot to this, obviously. There's a lot more than I can explain to you in 20 minutes. But the reality is that I kind of look at it as there are kind of two budget crises that we're looking at. There's the crisis we were already faced with pre-COVID, and then there's the crisis that we are now dealing with post-COVID because of the loss of revenue to the state. All right, so the pre-COVID situation, we were looking at when the Future Forward presentations were happening and the budget task force was meeting all of last year, we were operating under the idea that over the next year or two, we had a $30 to $50 million budget shortfall to deal with. Okay, decisions were made, recommendations were made from the budget task force at that point in about February to say, here are the things that we recommend that we should cut in order to sort of close the gap of that budget shortfall, with the intention that then we would go out for an election in the fall to sort of deal with the rest of the gap. So those cuts included central administration cuts. They were already told in February, all ADCO was told that they were taking a pay freeze at that point. That had not been decided by any of the negotiating teams yet, but it was for the principals they chose for them. And then there was at one point it was a 10% cut to all central administration staffing and budgets. Since then, it has increased to a 15% cut. There are jobs that have not been filled, that, one of them being one of our directors of HR is leaving to go to another district, and her position will not be filled. So we're going from 3 HR directors to 2. It's those kinds of cuts that are happening, and I have a list of them because they were shared with us at the budget task force meeting yesterday. But those kind of, that hiring freeze started in January. So that was part of that decision. There were some other decisions made about changing the ratio by 0.25, and that saved a significant chunk of money. So what we had done was made these decisions, and at that point, we had successfully kind of pushed back to the idea that we were not going to be on a pay freeze, that we were going to figure out how to increase pay. We had a total sort of pot of $9 million. And the one thing I'll tell you about the budget task force that is an advantage for us, the Teachers Association, is that every single budget task force meeting I have been to, there are parents from the community who are adamant with the district that we have to pay our teachers. That is the one thing that they will sort of hang their hat on. They know that's why they're here. That's why they sent their kids to school here, because we have excellent teachers, and they know that we get excellent teachers by paying them well. And so that has been the conversation. And so as a result, they helped us to be able to kind of carve out, we were not going to be frozen. We were going to figure out what it is that our pay increases were going to look like, and try to make them as equitable as possible across the board. The reality is that then once COVID happened, right, then we were just waiting to figure out how bad the School Finance Act was going to get. And the School Finance Act did continually get worse. The bargaining team made a decision early on that they would like to reach a settlement, with the understanding that we were automatically going to reopen the conversation in July once we had the actual numbers, because every CFO out there does their job by overestimating their costs and underestimating their revenue. We know it happens every year. The difference is that Cherry Creek up until now has always had a growing district with increasing revenue. And so we have always been able to negotiate before the School Finance Act has ever passed, and being able to get what it is that we deserve. Now what's happening is we knew that we didn't know how much the benefits change was going to save the district. And we wanted to be able to reopen that benefits conversation at that point, because there's lots of guesses, there's lots of estimates as to what this is going to be, but until everybody signed up for benefits, we had no idea. So we wanted to be able to look at that amount of money and figure out what we could do with it. We wanted to be able to look at what the state was really going to do. Was it going to get as bad as the district kept saying it was, which was we need furlough days right now, to enough for us to say we believe that we need steps and lanes, because that's what we deserve, and we think the money is there. Well, in the end, the reality is the story kind of got worse and worse. The School Finance Act got worse and worse. The funding didn't really improve a whole lot, but there is definitely still some conversation out there. But now we're looking at $60 million. $60 million is a lot. I will tell you that I've heard a lot of suggestions. We've heard suggestions about, you know, before we take furlough days, or we take some kind of 1% cut, or whatever it is that was on that slide during the webinar, that we need to make sure that we've cut everything up top that we possibly can. And I completely agree with you. Our bargaining team agrees with you. We have talked about the idea that we are not going to just agree to furlough days without ensuring that we have gone through and figured out all of the upper level cuts that need to happen. The one thing I will tell you is we've done a CAFR analysis. I know there's a perception out there that our district central administration has just grown and grown and grown. I can show you the numbers. They did grow a year ago significantly, and then they shrunk again back to where they had been on average for the last 8 years this year. So I think some of that spike, there's a lot of different reasons for that spike, but I do think, you know, I get where people have kind of gotten that perception. The reality, however, is that most of the jobs that have been added at central administration in the last couple of years are actually coordinator level jobs. And the important thing to understand is they're on this call right now, and you need to, all of our membership needs to understand that our coordinators, even at the district level, are teachers on special assignment. They are members just like you and me. They are on the same salary schedule just like you and me. Many of them, almost all of them probably, have more seniority than I do. And when push comes to shove, when we have that conversation about cutting those jobs, which I think is a legitimate conversation for us to have, the reality is they're going to trickle back down into classrooms, which is then going to push out our probationary teachers. And that's a really hard conversation to have. So where the district has landed right now is we are not cutting the number of positions we have in this district, right? I've said before, I've quoted our old CFO who always says it's a question of how much and how many. How much do we pay people? How many do we pay? And right now I would tell you that the district has decided that they're going to hold steady with how many, and instead start to look at how much. Their decision, and Casey and I have supported this, which is the idea that we believe right now we should be trying to save people's jobs. We were flat out told 2 weeks ago in a call with the superintendent that if we don't at some point agree to some kind of furlough days, we are going to be looking at pink slipping people in the next 2 weeks. And the reality is they can do that because the School Finance Act, when it was finally passed, gave every school district in the state permission to actually extend the date by which they had to announce non-renewals to the end of the month. And our district has not indicated at all that they would do that. They're not looking at that, but that's kind of the reality of where we are. The other things, so I would just say that about our district coordinators. I know that there's also there's some frustration out in the system right now because there are especially high school and some middle school people who are having their RFs, their responsibility factors, and their extended days cut. And some people believe that the union agreed to that, and the reality is we didn't. There is no stipulation in our policy that actually states how much of an RF someone should get, nor does it state how many extended days a particular position gets. What's been happening is there's been some inequity in the system, and there are people who have the exact same job description, job title, who get way more extended days than someone else. And so what the district has decided, apparently, we were informed, but we didn't agree to anything because there was nothing really to agree to, was that they were going to go back to the letter of the policy. And what the letter of the policy says is that you get a responsibility factor for being a coordinator of a department or a team leader. And there is some debate as to whether or not some of those positions are outside the confines of that language. And so that's been a total HR decision. Part of it is, I'm sure, to try to figure out how to make some cuts and to hopefully alleviate some cuts elsewhere. The one thing that everybody should know that's probably the most frightening part is that the superintendent yesterday in the budget task force meeting floated the idea that he wants to look at 7 furlough days. And that's a huge number. And there, we were surprised. It's a lot. I think, you know, at one point we were thinking we were looking at 4 or 5. And even that, we were trying to figure out ways to use CARES Act dollars to offset those days so that teachers wouldn't actually feel the impact of them. But that's the number they're going to start with. And that's obviously the number we're going to push back against, because 7 days is untenable. I will, however, tell you that we have members who believe that we should take 12. We should go ahead and take all 12 days, deal with the budget crunch, get the 30 million in the bank, and call it good and move on to next year. I don't personally agree with that. I know there are a lot of members out there that don't agree with that, but I need you to understand that we're not all of one mind, and we all don't see this budget crisis the same way. And probably a lot of that has to do with the fact that we are sitting at different spots in the pay scale. There are people who are off the pay scale who, relatively speaking, kind of came out of this less affected than those that are still in the pay scale, especially those teachers that are at the bottom of the pay scale, that are struggling with $42,000 a year to make ends meet. And the reality is that when we made the decision to freeze everyone's pay where it was, that actually disproportionately hurt our lower paid employees than it did our higher paid employees. And that's something that we as an organization need to come to terms with. We need to talk further about, because that's going to be a piece of what it is that we're going to have to figure out moving forward. But in addition to that, I will go back to just the fact that we believe we are not agreeing to furlough days until we know that all the other cuts that can be made, should be made, are made before we agree to that, which is why I would tell you I wouldn't offer 12 furlough days to get to at the start, because to me, that's a kind of a losing position when you're in a negotiation. So we will start with trying to figure out how we could have 0 furlough days, and kind of work our way from there. One of the things that we do have to be able to utilize is some portion of the CARES Act dollars. The CARES Act dollars do have a lot of stipulations that control how it is that you can use that money. You cannot use it for payroll. You can't use it for anything that was already on your books in March of 2020. It also has to be spent by December 31st of 2020. But there are some things, some creative ways that CFOs around the state are looking at to try to figure out how to use some of those dollars to offset the other cuts. So what would happen is we'd get credit for the furlough day cuts in the general fund, and then we'd backfill it, but we can't really say we're backfilling it with CARES Act dollars. And what that would essentially do is mean that when you take a furlough day, you don't work on that furlough day, nor do you get paid for that furlough day. So if we ended up with 5, or let's say 7, God forbid, then there would be 7 days off within the school year that you would not work and you would not get paid for, and then potentially could get sort of reimbursed from CARES Act dollars. That's our dream. That's what we're trying to work out. Then in addition to that, I know there's been a lot of conversation about when those furlough days should happen. The reality is they're probably going to be a mixture of, if they happen, they'd be a mixture of non-contact days as well as school days. You can't make them all be school days because of the fact that, because of instructional minutes. And we're not able to cut that many school days, but we also need to look at cutting on non-contact days and trying to limit that as much as possible, because we all know you're going to do the work anyways. So what's going to happen is we will be negotiating, the subcommittee of the compensation subcommittee will be negotiating specifics around furlough days, either July 8th or 10th. We are still trying to figure out when our facilitator is available and how we're doing that, but that's when we'll know. So I think everyone will have an answer by the middle of July, in terms of how that will all play out and how that will impact you. Unfortunately, we can't do it sooner because we have to wait until June 30th because of what the board has to do to approve the budget, et cetera. Then let's see. I think that's kind of the main things that I wanted to share. Yes. Oh, and it's also important. People have asked this. There's rumors out there that administrators are getting pay raises, administrators are not taking furlough days, et cetera. Every employee will be taking furlough days. We have been told it starts with Dr. Siegfried and moves its way down. If that is not the case in the end, there will be huge problems from us as well as from other groups. I think the community will also have a serious problem with that. And I think Dr. Siegfried knows that. And everybody is kind of in this together. And so we're all going to experience that together. The one thing about a furlough day is that it's based on your own per diem. So it doesn't impact you in the same way. Like it's proportionate theoretically to where you are on the pay scale, how much you get paid. So the in terms of negotiations being live streamed, there's been conversation about this. Negotiations starting in the 2021 school year will be live streamed. It is not, the subcommittees cannot be live streamed because our facilitator in a subcommittee is actually a mediator, and the Federal Mediation Conciliation Service will not allow her to be videotaped or recorded while she is mediating. So we can talk further about that, but that's basically where we are. I was also told recently Littleton didn't live stream theirs, and actually what they did was instead they showed a listening station that they put in the district offices, and people, if they wanted to, could come and watch there. And so that may be a possibility that we need to talk about. I just learned about that today, so I'm trying to figure that out. Let's see. Then I want to go back. I want to go to one last thing, which is I think a really important part, and I hate that there's 5 minutes left for us to talk about that, but that is the protests that have been happening, the experiences of our students and our teachers and our employees that have been more heavily impacted by what it is that's been going on, obviously for way too long, but most specifically in the last few weeks. There has been a conversation. The exec board asked directly of Dr. Siegfried, what conversations are we having about police in our schools? And are we going to consider whether it's appropriate to continue to employ SROs in our buildings? And the response from the superintendent and apparently from the school board, who's also been having this conversation, is that they are putting together a task force. That task force will be represented by students, parents, community members, employees, to begin to really look at what are the actual experiences of our students, specifically our students of color, as they interact with the SROs and/or discipline within our buildings. And the interesting thing about it is that we have 5 different jurisdictions that oversee the schools within the Cherry Creek School District. So we're different from DPS in that we don't have just one police department that we interact with. We actually have 5 different jurisdictions. And what's fascinating is that how those jurisdictions allocate resource officers as well as how they support the schools looks different depending on which community you're in, which school you're at. And so I think that's the beginning of the conversation, is assessing where are we, what do we have? And then Dr. Siegfried made it clear at one point, he said, we will begin to talk about these issues and we will start to figure out what it is that we expect of our police officers within our schools. And if they are not willing to comply with those expectations, then we will look at severing our ties with the police departments. I don't think we're there yet, but I do think that there is a very serious conversation happening about how does that play out for all of us. And I know that everyone has lots of feelings, opinions about that on all sides. And so I think it'll be important for us to figure out how to listen to all of those different points of view so that we can make the best, most informed decision. And There's obviously also been references to a racial literacy plan. There's a lot of work being done by our Office of Inclusive Excellence about how do we prepare teachers and SSPs to come back to school in the fall and be able to help their students, because our students are going to come back in a different place and they are going to have all kinds of needs. And you know it, you know you have students that have, you know, struggled because their families, their parents are out of work, they are homeless, they have been at the protests, they have been, you know, shot with rubber bullets, believe it or not. There are all kinds of things that our kids have been going through over the last few months because of COVID, because of the protests, because of everything that's happening in our world right now. And we have to be equipped to be able to handle those conversations and to be able to help our students in the best way possible. Because that's really what we're here for, is to take care of our students at Cherry Creek School District, and to do that in the best way possible. Also knowing that, that we as an organization are responsible for making sure we take care of our employees and we protect them as much as we can. So I think that that's, I got 2 minutes. I also, the last thing I would tell you is this. I know people are frustrated. I'm frustrated. We are, this has been a difficult 3 months. I fear it's going to get more difficult before it gets easier. And one of the things that I just want to stress to you is that there is an option out there. There are things happening to try to untangle the knot of school finance in the state of Colorado. There are 2 things that are going to happen in November that I think everyone should know about and communicate with as many people as you can. One of them is they have referred a measure to repeal the Gallagher Amendment. It is one of 3 amendments to the Constitution in Colorado that interact with each other and almost conflict with one another, so that it makes it that much more difficult for us to effectively fund our schools. It is part of the reason why we are in the situation we're in. It is why we have a structural deficit to start with. So I would tell you that you should educate yourself. You should try to understand what Gallagher is and why it is that we think it's absolutely essential that we repeal it. It was a bipartisan referral to the ballot in November. So I do think it has a good shot of being repealed. And it's one step in a longer process to try to do something. The last thing is there is an initiative 271, also referred to on the website as fairtaxcolorado.org. If you have not signed a petition to get 271 on the ballot, you need to find someone. I will come to your house and hand you my petition, and you can sign it. We need 125,000 signatures by the beginning of August, and we are trying to get this on the ballot in order to raise crucial funds. It is referred to as the fair tax because the idea is that we are moving away from a flat income tax in the state of Colorado to a graduated progressive tax system, where those that make less than $250,000 a year will actually see their tax rate decrease slightly. And then there will be a graduated increase from there beyond the 250,000. And the idea is that it could potentially raise $700 million in revenue to the general fund. That is a huge difference maker. That changes all of these conversations. That means we go back to the table in December and we figure out how it is that we're going to restore cuts that have been made. That's what we're talking about. So I need you to try to get involved with that conversation. Talk to your neighbors, whoever you can, because they're going to listen to you. The last thing, of course, is also that we don't know yet, but it's likely that the district is going to go for a bond and budget election. It's not going to be as large as they were originally planning, but it is going to be significant. A $30 million budget increase, mill levy override, would help our problem significantly. And the reality is that the district is looking at it as, we can't wait for the state to fix their problems. So we have to figure out how to fix some of this ourselves. And we know that we have voters in the community that have supported schools in the past, and we believe will continue to support schools in the future.
Carly, quick question.
Yes.
With the tremendous comments, conversations, and questions on both platforms, the Facebook Live and here,
Okay.
when is the next town hall? Because this is amazing conversation, needs to keep going forward.
I don't know. Casey and I we are not officially president and vice president until July 1. And so one of the things that we have talked about is that we were going to try to take the week of 4th of July off. So I do know that the superintendent is going to do a webinar on Monday afternoon. From what I understand, the purpose of that webinar is just to give people an update. So what I would suggest is that we probably try to have a live stream another week after maybe 4th of July. At that point, you know, we're also basing it on we only have one restart task force meeting next week. So there may not be new information until July 6th anyways. So hopefully we can try to find a time then. The Cherry Creek Educators Advisory Council is going to continue to meet as well. And they are also a great resource for all of us. And we want to be able to get you to as many different people as possible to get your questions answered. The executive board will obviously answer questions. So hopefully you can share. We'll get this video up as soon as we possibly can. So you can also direct friends, colleagues, even non-members who weren't able to be on this call to be able to watch the video and see what other further questions they have. We really are very conscientiously working to try to make this as manageable and doable as possible for all of us.
Well, a huge thank you to both you and Casey for managing this today and for being such an important voice for the membership assembled. Thank you.
Thank you. And you know, keep the emails coming, keep the questions coming. We will continue to kind of engage in the conversation, and hopefully knowing more puts you at ease a little bit, even though knowing more also makes it that much worse, right? And so I appreciate the engagement and the effort of all of our members, our exec board, people who are here on this call today to be a part of our association. It really is our association, and we want to do a better job moving forward in communicating with all of you and sharing with you what it is that's going on and really hearing your concerns, even if they disagree with our own, right? Because that's going to be the health of this organization. So all right, I'm sure I missed something. I'm sure I didn't explain something well. So let me know what it is you would like more information about, and we will figure out what it is we can do moving forward. Casey, anything else?
I'm just going to say thank you so much for joining, for helping, for understanding. We are doing the absolute best that we can. You really can't see me right now, which is okay. And you know, we are trying to be as transparent and as open with communication as we possibly can too, so that you guys know where we are and what's going on. As Carly explained earlier, things are changing so quickly and moving so fast that sometimes by the time I have the opportunity to answer an email that was just sent, the information that I was going to respond to has already changed. So please hang in there with us. We're doing that. I appreciate you all. And, you know, keep the emails coming. Carly and I take over officially July 1st. We are moving into a new office. I will have a new email and probably new phone numbers. We will get that information out to you as soon as we've got that and we're settled. With that, I just want to wish everybody a happy, I was going to say happy weekend, but it's not the weekend yet. It's only Wednesday. So enjoy the rest of your evening. And thank you again so much for your support. We really, really appreciate it.
All right, take care.
Have a good night, you guys.